about the future, and the company that her project where they bus tram drivers to have physical outlets. First is midnight view. Which lots all life in that country. But he's also an activist. He's also a scholar. He's got people that and we're going to do 2 rounds of discussion here. Then we'll open the floor and we'll have 5 rounds by panel. So I've just realized that the Zoom people haven't been listening to me. So we'll start with the first question. I just introduced the panelists, but you can read up on them on your program. Okay. So the first round, and we'll start with Andre, and then maybe just go in that direction, so towards me. So the first question is basically, what are you doing as activists, and how are you relating these different moments and these different movements in different ways? Yeah? And you have to come up. Just speaking.
Well, thank you for having me here. And thank you for the organizers for bringing me here. It's a great honor to speak at World Ecology Conference. And on my way here, while flying, I had slight misfortune to read French newspapers. And in the French newspapers, there was Bernard-Henri Lévy, who is somehow still alive, unfortunately, writing about absolutely everything from war in Ukraine to ornithology, but also saying things like this. This is a quote, I think it was Le Monde. Great revolutionary parenthesis is closed for good. No more magnificent barefoot men marching on a dazzled world whom Victor Hugo had once admired. Any revolutionary transformation, Bernard-Henri Lévy says, inevitably means an eruption of violence. And because our societies are extremely fragile, the major responsibility of any intellectual and other public figures is to protect those fragile societies from such an eruption. Now, the journalist, also an idiot who was interviewing him, said very quickly that this is absolutely true, and that any attempted radical transformation was either totalitarian or terrorist or both. And that the very idea of another society has become almost completely inconceivable. Conclusion is that we are, in a certain sense, this is a journalist, condemned to live in the world in which we live. It wasn't a pleasant flight, but it's interesting. It gives you an opening, a window into the way that intellectuals, if this word should be used or applied to these two gentlemen, are thinking about today. And what we are talking about here is, I have to confess that I am in certain degree of agreement, at least with Bernard Levy, when he says that there is a certain responsibility of intellectuals and other public figures in protecting society. I do think that there is, not in the same way that he does, of course. I have spent my entire life participating in what could be called the anarchist, or more precisely, libertarian socialist movement, and cut my teeth, so to speak, as an activist in what was the first occupation of a factory in revolutionary or post-revolutionary or post-socialist Eastern Europe. Factory called Jugoremedia, where the anarchist collective joined the workers in trying to resuscitate the idea of self-management, of socialist self-management, where workers would run the factory themselves. We have failed, and this is something that I would like to discuss with you today as to why. But even since then, I was fascinated with what I started calling the Michelet's paradox. And Michelet, again, I'm still in the French history or the French language. Michelet used to say about French Revolution that day everything was possible. Today was forever, and everything was just a glimmer of reality. It's a rough translation. But the problem with glimmers is that if it is only a glimmer that you create, the bureaucrats, even revolutionary bureaucrats, will show up and they will turn off the light. The problem really is, and this is what I think that Michelet was referring to, is a problem of revolutionary alienation, when the revolutionaries are, in a certain sense, alienated from the creations, from things that they create. The problem then is the tension between these brief moments of revolutionary self-activity, say, occupation of a factory, and the long-term institutionalization of these goals, say, proletarian internationalism, proletarian socialism, proletarian libertarian socialism, perhaps. How to resolve this tension? This is something that I have spent my entire life on the activist, anarchist, libertarian, communist, or socialist left trying to find an answer to. The closest I was able to do this was since 2012, when I became involved with the Kurdish revolutionary movement, which I'm sure that here in Germany is a well-known entity, well-known movement. And I visited Rojava on several occasions. Rojava is a place in Syria, northeastern Syria, that is self-governed, organized around the principles of democratic confederalism, democratic communalism, and democratic autonomy, as well as around a very intriguing concept of democratic nation. And we can talk about all of this if we would like. But what is so fascinating about this experience, it's an experience of social revolution that has education as well as ecology at its heart. So we have established something there called the Rojava University, where I teach. And also, besides the University of Rojava, the Institute for Social Sciences at the University of Rojava, which is teaching historical social science under the name of Sociology of Freedom, and also Genealogy or Science of Women. I have 0 minutes remaining, in which I'm going to say that that experience has been for me one of the most intriguing and most rewarding experiences of my activist life, or life as an activist. And I guess in the second round, I can add a few scholarly remarks about this experience, and also as a response to what my colleagues and comrades are about to say. So enough from me for this round, and then we will have the next one, right?
Thank you so much. a good thing we didn't record that, Andrea. Sorry, just joking. Are you? Okay, and we continue with Christopher.
Right. I'll try to give you an overview of some of the political work I've been involved in the past years, and then analysis of that work will be in a later part of this discussion. So in 2014, we founded Ende Gelände, and it was an effort to bring together the many local climate justice groups that were existent in Germany and were focused on local struggles as a result of the summit protest strategy, which was employed before that, completely failing in Copenhagen in 2009. Then people concentrated on local struggles. That didn't get much visibility. And then we tried to bring them together, starting in 2015 with a mass action of civil disobedience. The idea was to flood the German coal mines with us people and stop the diggers and all the machinery in those coal mines. And it was created to be a spectacle. So these mines are of the biggest holes in Europe. The diggers are the biggest land moving machines in the world. And they look from like something out of a horror movie and or Star Trek, no, Star Wars. And we all wore white suits, which has many practical reasons, but it also looks very cool. So that did create a lot of visibility. We also chose this strategically to highlight German environmental destruction and debunk the myth that is still quite prevalent of Germany being such a green economy and so advanced in saving the environment and so on. And also to showcase capitalist practices, because with a massive mine and profit being extracted from that and people being displaced for it and so on, and the environment being destroyed, you can very clearly show how capitalism works. So the first action was in 2015 with 1,500 people. After that, we did it like at least once a year. It peaked at around 6,000 participants and inspired many similar actions in Europe. A direct result of that was in a year later in 2016 that the local mining trade union was pretty pissed off with us and staged anti-climate demonstrations. They took that a bit too far. One of the trade union activists, full-time workers of the trade union, was selling T-shirts with a fist squashing the Climate Camp logo over his private Facebook account and so on. That got into the press. So they took their protest too far. We weren't interested in a conflict with the miners, and so we established a dialogue. And that went on for 2 years with several small group meetings, which weren't public, decidedly, and a big meeting once at a very surreal place with approximately 80 people, carefully curated on both sides. And then on the left, you had all the climate people, and on the right, all the workers. And this dialogue, which I could tell you a lot more about, ended with the Hambach forest protests in 2018. So it ended when the climate movement had a first victory of stopping a mine because of very, very different perceptions of what was happening there. And round about that time, I was part of co-founding Alle Dörfer bleiben. So that's an alliance between people being expropriated for these mines and being evicted from their homes, and those homes being completely destroyed and there only being the mine left. Local supporters from the cities around and climate justice activists. We've been quite successful in fighting the mining. Right now, we're pressuring the new state government here in North Rhine-Westphalia over their coalition talks over having a 1.5-degree budget for the coal mining and saving one especially contested village, which is right on the edge of the mine. And then, so that's the whole context. And then last year, Manfred, who was like the main guy from the trade union that we always organized these talks with, calls me. And we hadn't been in contact since the Hambach Forest protests. And I knew that he'd been very sick. And I thought, shit, maybe he's like terminally ill and he wants to kill me before going away himself, because we've destroyed all these jobs because we've really moved forward the coal exit and so on. And, does he want to take me with him to his grave? I was seriously a bit scared. And the actual thing was, no, he had burned out in all those, in all that work. He'd got a job with a different trade union, works now on just transition, criticizes endless GDP growth, and was pissed off with the EU border regime. That was a pretty big change. And yeah, and he told me that nobody cares about the mine being closed earlier anymore because the workers have been compensated with money and they want to leave anybody anyway, because nobody likes being told all the time that your work destroys the planet.
Great, thank you so much. Okay. Okay.
Okay. I'm Julia. I live in Leipzig and I'm not very used to speak in English, so I'm very sorry if I sometimes don't find a word or something, but you will help me probably. Okay, I will also try to do it very quick. As socialists and now eco-socialists, I would say, me and my comrades from the SDS, we are trying to bring together climate and labor movement because we think that we need more power and more people in the climate movement. So this is our idea to get, to get more powerful. I know two examples pretty well in which climate and trade union activists try to come together, and I will try to explain them very quickly so we can discuss them afterwards a bit more. The first example is the campaign TVN 2020, where climate activists fighted together with public transport workers for better working conditions and for more and better public transport. There were two reasons why me and my comrades, we tried to bring together those activists from the two sides actively. Like, we didn't wait for it to happen, but we tried to bring people together with organizing methods and so on. First, we discussed Ende Gelände and the dynamics in the Lausitz, and we were like impressed and worried in the same time, because we worried about these problems of the jobs versus environment dilemma in the future. And we thought, if there's always the freaky left-wing radical climate activists on the one side and the working people who want to want the status quo forever, then we won't be strong enough. So we need not only to articulate that we want ecological and social, a solution for both, but we need to find a common strategy. Like, it's not something which we can only say that capitalism is the problem, but we need to develop common fights. And the second was that we saw Fridays for Future all around us and thought, okay, that's a pretty good moment where a lot of people want to discuss with the whole society. So probably those activists will be very open to talk to different people, to trade unionists or to their neighborhoods, because those teenagers and students were really interested in talking to like everyone around them. So we thought, okay, maybe that's a good moment where we don't stay in our left-wing radical bubble, but to go out into the society. So we decided to do one very simple thing. We wrote a letter as a trade union AG, like a task force in Fridays for Future, to the DGB-Gewerkschaften and said, we want to talk to you and we want to talk about the 90% we maybe have in common and not only about the 10% which we always discuss, like you said, like the coal question, but we want to talk about all the things we could reach together. And there was one department, the Department of Buses and Trains, more or less, and they were very interested in working together and in discussing, because they said we have a Tarifrunde, like collective bargaining round next year. And of course, we need a lot of support from the society, because we are always the assholes if we strike, because no one can go to school or to work. So we really need people in our, who stand in solidarity with us. And we said, okay, probably a lot of climate activists, that was like an idea of us. We think that a lot of climate activists are open to stand in solidarity with you, because we think that the climate activists, when they say we also want social justice, that they mean it, like that it's not only very middle class kids not really wanting social justice, but that there's only a strategy missing where we find together and can do something together. So we tried to collect a lot of contacts in the trade union and in the climate movement, and in 30 cities. In the end, there are developed common alliances of climate activists and bus drivers mostly. In some cities where maybe only 3 or 4 or 5 bus drivers involved, in other maybe 30, I would say. And yeah, during months, we prepared this bargaining round with action days and so on. And in the end, in a lot of cities, we stood together at the strike picket line, thank you. And fight it together for their goal of better working conditions in whole Germany and for more public transport for all of us. And I think my second example is, I will tell you about it in the next round.
Thanks so much. One second, just preparing.
Muy bien. Yo lo haré en español.
I will speak Spanish.
Hay un poeta guatemalteco que ha muerto a cabal, y él tenía un poema muy pequeño.
There is a Guatemalan poet that has died, and he has a very short, interesting poem.
Y decía, de vez en cuando camino al revés.
He says, sometimes I go backwards.
Es mi forma de recordar.
It is my way of remembering.
Si caminara solo adelante,
If I just was walking forward,
te podría contar cómo es el olvido.
I could tell you how it is to forget.
Eso nos ha tocado por 500 años a los mayas en Guatemala vivir.
This is what had happened to us, the Maya people in Guatemala during 500 years.
Recordar para no olvidar.
Remember not to forget.
Y en los últimos 36 años de guerra, casi desaparece el pueblo chortí, del cual yo vengo.
During many years, then the folk that I belong to almost disappeared.
Y nos tocó, después de los acuerdos de paz, reconstituirnos.
After the peace agreement with them, we have to reconstitute ourselves,
Y tuvimos que correr mucho en esa reconstitución
and we have to run a lot in this reconstitution
porque nos propusieron como desarrollo la minería y las grandes represas.
because they proposed to us as development a lot of mining and big dams, water dams.
Entonces tuvimos que reaprender nuestra lengua,
So we have to relearn our own language,
nuestros principios espirituales,
our spiritual principles,
nuestros territorios
our territories,
y nuestros gobiernos comunales.
and our criminal government.
Tuvimos que quitarle las tierras a las empresas
We have to reclaim and take over the land of the big companies
que por 500 años hemos tenido a pesar de la colonia.
that have been in our hands despite from the colonial time.
Y tuvimos entonces que entender qué era el capital y cómo funcionaba
We have to understand capital and how it works
para saber cuál era la estrategia para detener el avance de este capital.
to learn the strategy to stop this kind of development.
Fuimos a las cortes
We went to the courts
a jugar con las reglas de ellos,
to play with their rules.
reclamamos nuestros territorios
We reclaim our land
y les ganamos con las reglas de ellos.
and we won with their rules.
En toda América Latina se pidieron consultas cuando vino el boom de la minería.
In all Latin America, they were claiming for consultancy when the mining boom started,
Pero nosotros también las pedimos.
but we asked also that for ourselves.
Y cuando ya llegábamos a un acuerdo en la consulta,
And when we agree in that consultation,
decíamos que no era necesario que nos consultaran porque eran nuestras tierras.
we say that it was not necessary to consult us because it was our land.
Lo que habíamos entendido es que cada día que el capital no se invierte, ellos pierden.
We have learned that every day that capital invests and every delay, then they lose.
Y nosotros hemos resistido 500 años,
And we have resisted during 500 years,
pero podíamos resistir otros 500,
so we could resist another 500,
pero el capital no puede.
but the capital cannot.
Esa es una estrategia que los pueblos hemos aprendido en estos años.
This is a strategy that our folk has learned during these years.
Aprendimos otra cosa y era que hay que compartir nuestro conocimiento con los otros pueblos.
We have also learned another thing, and this is to share our experiences with other people,
Que hay que tejernos con otros pueblos,
that we have to interlink with other people.
porque aunque podíamos ganarle a unos inversionistas y quebrar una empresa,
That despite that maybe had succeeded in broken one company,
nuestras fuerzas no eran suficientes para detener la embestida del capital.
our strengths were not enough to stop capital.
Entonces tenemos que articularnos con otros pueblos, con otros aprendizajes, con otros conocimientos.
So we have to articulate ourselves with other kind of knowledges and with other experiences to fight together.
Hemos aprendido que una vara se puede quebrar,
We have learned that the stick can be broken in two,
pero cuando somos varias es imposible quebrar una vara.
but when we are many, then it's impossible to break.
Y cada vara representa una autoridad de nuestros pueblos
And each of these sticks represent an authority of these people,
y una autoridad representa una comunidad.
and each authority represents a community.
Entonces hay que organizarnos y organizarnos.
So then we need to organize and organize.
También pensamos cuál es el otro paso que tenemos que dar.
Then we also thought about what is the next step that we can take.
Hemos construido poco a poco nuestras academias mayas.
We have also built slowly and slowly our own academia.
Existe la Universidad de Ixil,
There is the University of Chile,
la Universidad Cachiquel,
the University of Cachiquel,
nuestra Pluriversidad Chortí,
our pluridiversity, you say diversity,
¿Por qué pluriversidad y no universidad?
why pluridiversity and not university?
Porque reconocemos los múltiples conocimientos
Because we recognize multiple knowledge
que son capaces de relacionarse
that are able to communicate or relate to each other
y cambiar esta visión de sociedad que tenemos,
and change the vision that we have about our society,
que es extractivista,
which is extractive,
consumista
consumer,
y violenta.
and violent.
Pero si podemos integrar los conocimientos de ustedes y los de nosotros,
But if we can integrate your knowledge and our knowledge,
podemos considerar otro futuro para la humanidad.
then we can consider another future for you.
Y eso creemos nosotros que es importante que la academia empiece a dialogar. ¿Cuál es el futuro que nos estamos planteando como sociedad?
What is academia to understand that? So what is the proposal that we are doing for a future society?
Gracias.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Omar. He got more time because it was translated, so he had double time, but he was very concise, so thank you very much. So we'll go to the next round of the panelists. And here, so the question is now, how can we use a world ecology framework to kind of contextualize these different struggles? Yeah, so we're moving from Gojova to the Lausitz and to Hambacher Forst to 30 cities in Germany to Guatemala. And of course, it's all entwined with colonial history, imperialism, capitalism. So how can we, understand this? And I want to ask Andre to go first. And so the idea is that you would comment on those three and see how you can relate that to world ecology, because I know that you're the most world ecologist of the panelists. So I'll let you do that, and the other three can then respond in their own way to your provocation. Okay, it's the same problem we've been having all conference. I think by Friday, I mean, today we learned that one of the issues was a buckle contact, a loose wire. So I'm very optimistic that I know I'm confident that by the end of the conference we'll have solved all the technical issues. Oh, there you are. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So yes, listening to my friends, it seems to me that Bernard-Henri Lévy, with whom I started my first introduction, who is saying that our societies are too fragile, is actually wrong. I think that what is fragile is indeed capitalism. And in thinking about capitalism, I actually do believe that we are now coming or approaching what could be called the end of capitalism, and that is a provocation. So in a sense, I would really be curious to see what my friends think about this. I do think that we are now in a situation, and in world systems theory or analysis, and in world ecology, we have been talking about this for a while. And I do think that this presents us with a very important question. One of the most important tasks is to find a theory. And that theory would help us what Karl Marx, or as they call him in the United States, Charles Marx, would call self-clarification of struggles and desires of the age, meaning a theoretical perspective that could help us go beyond labor reductionism or labor fundamentalism, environmentalist reductionism. Theoretical perspective that could assist us in bringing different kinds of work, and I would say at least 3 kinds of work together in a unified theoretical framework. Theoretical perspective that could help us go beyond this binary, beyond these dualisms that have been oppressing us, constraining us ever since the dawn of modernity, and that begin with this nature, society, nature, humanity, dualism, which in many ways is core conceptual or conceptual core of modernity, capitalist modernity. And finally, theoretical perspective that could also help us understand what are the possibilities and limits of capitalist accumulation. I believe that world ecology is exactly such a perspective. It's a theoretical provocation that's more than a provocation. It's a theoretical conversation that is also not only theoretical, but ultimately extremely practical. And it helps us, I believe, connect various dots, connect these different struggles. All of my friends here spoke very eloquently about bypassing or going beyond what would be a dualistic understanding of labor versus environment, labor struggles and environmental struggles. And I'm struck by how world ecological, in a sense, this all sounds. And in world ecology, we sometimes speak of world ecological praxis. And by this, we mean something that comes from above. The externality of nature, the flatness of space, the linearity of time, something that Omar was talking about very eloquently. World praxis from below would challenge all of this. It would begin with internality of nature. It would begin with what I was describing as self-management, the idea of anachronistic, rebellious temporality, and the idea of very different conceptualization of space. And I think in many ways, everything that my friends were talking about corresponds to this. And as such, I was particularly curious and struck by what Omar was saying in terms of the intergenerational character of the struggle. We do need to recognize, first of all, that we have, and I think that world ecology can serve as a very potent bridge to do so, how to translate all of these struggles, how to bring them together, but also how to understand the intergenerational character of these struggles, which I think is very important, that move through time and space in a very particular way. And I was reminded, I'm going to finish with this, of Oberyu. I don't know if you're familiar with this. This is the last Russian avant-garde movement. And it was led by Daniel Harms, who was later murdered in captivity, police captivity in the Soviet Union. And Kazimir Malevich came to him and he said, well, you are the young troublemakers. We are the old troublemakers. Let's figure out the way to make trouble together. And then he gave him a book with a beautiful inscription that says, now go and stop modernity. And I think in many ways, mutatis mutandis, if we change certain things, if we change certain wording, but keep that same message, this is what we need to do. We need to come together. We need to recognize differences, but we need to address what is the core of the problem. The core of the problem is capitalism. And this might sound as a provocation, at least I hope it will. The only solution to this is planetary self-management, planetary internationalist, not just internationalist, planetary socialism. And I think that this idea and finding ways of moving towards something like this is something that we should all aspire to. And I really hope that some of my friends here are going to disagree, and then we can help open a conversation that would be productive and insightful. And I stole the 0 minutes remaining.
Great, thank you, Andre. That was brilliant introduction for the second round. And it was even less than 5 minutes, so amazing. I'm not going to repeat what you said because you just said it so clearly. Who wants to go first? Are you still discussing? Nick Lackstock?
So I'll try to connect my experiences with framework of the conference, and also share some personal learnings as well. So why did the dialogue with the workers fail? It failed because we have completely different cultures and worldviews. Like when we were talking about growth, competition, wealth, we meant completely different things. It failed because of the material interests of the workers and of that specific union, because that specific union was organizing the people in the mine highly successfully. They had 90% organization rate. And in the renewable sectors, it was a different union. So that union was fighting to stay as big as it was and had no interest in talking about the transformation, which we wanted to talk about. The workers that we spoke to, and especially the trade union members, they did not feel any responsibility or global solidarity with people in other countries that were affected by climate catastrophe, for example, and were constantly downplaying Germany's responsibility for the climate catastrophe, or including simply denying climate change. And it's a highly corporatist union. And at the end, we had very different information about what was happening in Hambach Forest, which is also a sign of how strong social media is, because like they were completely appalled about something that we didn't know about. It was just a story that we hadn't heard about somebody being like sprayed with shit or something. We didn't even know what they were referring to when they were like, after that, what's happened? How can you still believe we can talk with each other? We're like, what are you talking about? It still served for a lot of things, like changing the story from an undesirable conflict of workers versus climate activists to a hopeful one of workers and climate activists talking to each other, of building trust between us as individuals. And what helped in that was always recurring to shared values, like we all want security, we all want recognition, and very important, humor. And I think that's actually important also for any theory that we're going to come up with. That humor is something that was so connecting. And then with the creation of Alle Dörfer bleiben, I think it's interesting that that was a conscious shift away from event activism like that Wendegelände to permanent organizing and to fighting together with a frontline community, even though that frontline community, we sometimes say, is not Alle Dörfer bleiben, it's Alle Pools bleiben, because everybody's got a pool there in their home. So it's pretty privileged frontline community, but still people are being evicted. And very conservative, very rural, very Catholic. So that was a real challenge and change in how we organize, getting out of our bubble. And a conscious building up of a new point of intervention for the movement, because it was clear that the Hambach Forest conflict, which was the big point of intervention before that, was going to end. So it was a case of planning for the movement, which often I think we don't do. And we created an actor by getting together with the frontline community, with locals from nearby cities and radical activists. We created an actor around which a whole ecosystem of organizations could evolve, because it was like an actor of the center, of a very left center. You could have like very radical groups, NGOs, party people, all evolving around this main actor, which like keeps it all together. And it gives you a much wider toolbox. We use trials, petitions, lobby talks, blockades, demonstrations, classical concerts. So it's been a very inspiring and interesting experience. Then I come to this conference and I notice it's not environmentalism of the working class. And I think that's a big problem. And talking to Julia, I heard from her what maybe a conference like this, or what scholars could, what their role could be in directing, or in not directing, but informing people in their political work on how to pick their fights, because we all, well, people who are as privileged as me have to choose their battles, and yeah, maybe you can do that part.
Thanks so much, Christopher. Julia.
Yeah, kind of difficult job, but I will try. I think I have one question or one idea of what world ecology could also do, because it sounded a bit like that it's good to just collect different fights and to bring them together and to get them in any kind of a conversation. And I think what sociologists or like a conference like this or world ecology in general could do is to try to analyze how do different fights and different parts of the working class do find together, and when do we get more divided? Because I think what we just discussed, what is really interesting is, okay, Ende Gelände, a lot of people do it, they really want to change the whole world, and they do, yeah, like they made the coal question very popular in Germany, and that's great. And on the other side, we have a lot of new conflicts and this jobs versus environment dilemma. So I think if, yeah, we should also analyze like the conflict dynamics, which lie in those very, very difficult questions in between. As you maybe, Oliver, yesterday told us, we work in an alienated way, and it's a very difficult question how we solve this problem in between being abhängig, dependent from a job which is destroying yeah, the world in the end. So I want to use my time maybe, and yeah, in Jena we call it social ecological Transformationskonflikte. And we try to analyze which difficulties, for example, exist if also the automotive sector will change, because we can anticipate what kind of struggles will come. And I think we should not only say maybe activists will develop good struggles which bring everyone together, because it's such a difficult job to develop ideas, campaigns, and so on, that it would help to see when conflicts come together and when people get more divided. One struggle which brings a lot of people together, local struggles and a labor struggle and climate activists, is a struggle which is at the moment in Florence, in Italia. And there, GKN in German, a component supplier for the car industry, that was to be closed a year ago. And GKN told the workers on Friday that they wouldn't have to come on Monday. So they were all, yeah, they would lose their job. And they occupied the factory 1 year ago. And they are extremely well organized. There are a lot of Marxists in the factory, I think, and they do this, they built this group 10 years ago maybe. And it's called Collettivo di Fabbrica, maybe you heard about it. And since then, the workers have been trying to build broad alliances. So they talked to scientists from the University of Rome, and they talked to FFF Florence and FFF Italy. And together they made demonstrations where I think the biggest demonstrations, there were 50,000 people last year. And they fighted first against the wave of layoffs, which will come in Europe and I think in Italy as well, for sustainable change in the transport sector, and during the war now for peace in Ukraine. And yeah, I think that 50,000 people followed their demonstration shows that maybe, and that's maybe also a question for a discussion, there lies a lot of power in those labor struggles, I think, but that's of course a question, because if 250 workers in the automotive sector, if they lose their job and they talk about this question of labor and income and all those questions, I think a lot of people probably in Italy could relate to it and could say, okay, we all need our income. And now they try to develop this conversion plan and talk about, it's like Luca's plan in the 80s, I think. It's really, they do the same steps. They talk like, we cannot win this fight in our factory. We need other factories and we need to build hegemony in the whole society, because we know we cannot win this war against GKN and this whole system. So yeah, I'm really interested how important you think are those labor struggles, because for me, like, only because I saw how big waves those struggles can get if they are well organized, make me think that we should, even if it's very hard in Germany or maybe everywhere, it has kind of a special importance to focus on those struggles. Yeah.
Thanks so much, Julia, and now Ola.
Una de las cosas que nosotros aprendimos después de la guerra
One of the things that we learned after our war
es que buscaban romper nuestra identidad de la relación tierra y humanos, ¿no?
is that they try to divide the relationship that we have with the land, with the soil.
Porque a medida que no nos identificamos con nuestros territorios, con nuestra tierra,
You can continue.
pensamos que solo son recursos que se deben de explotar y vender.
Because if we don't identify ourselves with the soil, then it's just become a resource that you, something that you can commodify.
Entonces no tenemos nada por qué pelear, sino algo de qué hacer dinero.
Then we don't have anything to fight for, anything just to have money from.
Nuestro trabajo fue crear espacios en los cuales pudiéramos hablar después de la guerra.
So it was a case of where we could build these spaces that we can talk with each other after the war
Y volvernos a conectar con ella.
and to reconnect with each other again.
Eso hizo que hubiera una organización muy fuerte que pudiera enfrentar a las empresas en los territorios.
Repítemelo, por favor. Se me fue.
Que cuando nos identificamos con la tierra, logramos unirnos y poder hacerle frente a las empresas.
So when we could identify with the land, then of course we could unite among ourselves and then also confront the other.
Ahora Centroamérica está en crisis
Now Central America is in crisis,
y entonces el capitalismo está en crisis.
so capitalism is also in crisis.
Ya no funcionan los estados
The states are not working anymore,
que permitían control a ellos.
which could allow to control the situation.
Las élites económicas han tenido que ir a hacer gobierno
Economic elites have to go to the government
y no saben hacerlo.
and they don't know how to do it.
Entonces hay una fragilidad
There is a fragility
del capitalismo
of capitalism.
y hemos pensado en Centroamérica.
And we were thinking about Central America.
Todo cambio en mi país
Every change in my country, Guatemala,
pasa por un cambio en todos los países centroamericanos.
passes through all the changes in the rest of the Central American countries.
Entonces está la conexión planetaria en eso.
There is a planetary connection in that,
Pero eso es práctica, son luchas diarias
but that is practice, everyday fights
que necesitan ser escritas, ser contadas.
that need to be told, need to be written,
Y esa es la relación de de la academia, de la teoría y la práctica.
And that is the relationship between the academia and the praxis.
Ese es un paso más que debemos de dar en estos procesos,
It's another step that we have to take in these processes,
porque también la academia ha entrado en crisis
because the academia is also in crisis
y ha limitado su pensamiento.
and has limited our thoughts.
Y tenemos que romper ese límite de la academia.
And we have to fight against this limitation.
¿Cómo se relaciona con las luchas de las comunidades, de los ciudadanos,
How
las
it
ciudadanas?
relates to the struggle of the people, of the citizens.
¿Y cómo vuelve a teorizar esto?
And how do we theorize that again?
¿Y cómo nos ayuda a entender cómo se reproduce el capital?
And how it can help us to understand how capital reproduces itself.
A medida que entendemos cómo se reproduce, entendemos cómo detenerlo.
Yeah, if we understand how it reproduces itself, then also we can stop it.
El capital ahora está usando los microdatos, la micromedia,
Capital is using microdata, for example,
y por ahí está controlando a la juventud.
and then also is controlling this way the young people.
¿Qué estamos haciendo nosotros para descapitalizar la mente de la sociedad?
So what are we doing to decapitalize the mind of the people?
Porque habemos pobres que somos de un pensamiento capitalista muchísimo más que las élites económicas.
Excuse me? We are what?
Pobres que tienen una mente capitalista.
Yeah, because there are poor people, they have a capitalist mindset.
Eso está pasando con los sindicatos.
That is happening with the unions.
Tenemos que avanzar en eso.
We have to advance in that.
Tenemos que entender otros conocimientos, otras ciencias.
We have to understand other kind of knowledges, other sciences.
Se ha dicho que los pueblos indígenas tenemos saberes.
It has been said that indigenous people have
Saberes,
sapiencia in pluralis, not knowledge,
pero no ciencia.
but not science.
Es una forma de verticalizar el conocimiento.
There is a way of making knowledge vertical.
Y eso no ayuda a un proceso humano, colectivo de cambio.
That does not help a human objective or something common.
Y ese es un esfuerzo que ahora mismo estamos haciendo en los pueblos indígenas.
And this is what we are doing just now, indigenous people.
Nosotros contar nuestros conocimientos,
We telling about our knowledge,
no que otro nos cuente cómo somos,
not that somebody else tell us how we are,
pero necesitamos también una relación con los otros conocimientos.
but we also need a relationship with the other kind of knowledge.
Con esa colectividad del conocimiento
With this kind of collective knowledge,
no puede el capitalismo,
capitalism cannot,
porque necesita individualizar para concentrar.
because it needs to individualize in order to concentrate.
Creemos que esos son algunos pasos que podemos empezar a dar como sociedad.
We think that this is one of the steps that we can start to life. Yes?
Great, thank you so much. So we've got a little bit of time. I think we'll be a little bit longer than 5 for this session because we started late, right? So I'm going to open up to the floor. And I think the idea today is not so much Q&A, but really just to continue the discussion. So anyone who wants to join, please come up to the front and speak here. You can start forming a queue, basically. Yeah, come. You have to come up here to speak.
Yeah, thank you all for these talks. I have a question and sort of a comment for the comrade von Ende Gelände, Christopher, sorry. It starts with sort of the question part, which is, you said yourself, it's about sort of the spectacle, this symbolic politics of showing this is where the resistance is. But But how are your thoughts on, is this actually up for the task? Because of course, it's not about stopping the destruction of one ecosystem like the Hambacher Forest or stopping one coal mine. It's about having a very complete transition of the whole economy and society in a short number of years. And my perspective is that if you do this sort of symbolic politics, it is good to, well, the problem is not that there's too less awareness for the dangers and trouble we are in. We're missing strategies and we're missing power resources. So what are the next steps? I think that's the limit of direct action, of civil disobedience, and how could this be connected to workers organizing, who in my perspective do have the power resources. And that brings me to the second part of the comment. I was actually, no disrespect for you, but I was a bit aghast about the formulation you had. The guy called you and said he was very pissed off. And then I quote you, because of all the jobs that we destroyed. And I think really, this is really a part of the problem. And you said that the dialogue did not work because the workers in the IGBC, lignite mining, did not have an interest in the transformation. And my perspective is that a lot of the climate justice activists, they have a very abstract feeling of global environmental justice, and they have a very abstract perception of what's going on, and that's often needs they neglect the immediate class interests of the people. And I think if you neglect the immediate interests, where are they going to work in a couple of years? How are they going to pay off the debt and all this stuff? Then there's really no way into this conversation, because they just feel disrespected, and they feel like they're a passive. They're being passive and massive maneuver, for example, and quite the contrary of talking to them as active agents of change. So yes, I think that's, for me, it's really what Ende Gelände says, there are no jobs on a dead planet. I mean, it's a good example of how maybe some of these activists think, oh, we are thinking of your class interests. Yeah, but that's so abstract. It's like, yeah, of course, there's no jobs on a dead planet, but how do we transition our industry? How do we keep our jobs? And I think that's where we need to be really careful not to break. Yeah, maybe that.
So we're going to have a round at the end where the panelists can respond to these points, but also say what they want. But before, we're just going to let people discuss.
I have pretty general questions to any or all of the speakers, because I share many things with you. I'm involved in many struggles in my own country, similar to you, which you have described. So I want to know a few things, two things in fact. One, do you discuss within the movement, within the organizational space of the movement, or when you get in touch with other movements, do you discuss that there is, if there is a necessity to go beyond not only the physical boundaries of your particular movement, but also theoretically, politically, to think of something else, going really beyond, think of changing the society. You see, I mean, there was once a time when there was I'm taking my cue from what Jason said in the plenary about a communist horizon. So if I may be permitted to use the word, there was once a time, or maybe an utopia today, maybe a dream, a fantasy. There was a thing called a communist international. So this working class unity, this concept of revolution, it was never to be visualized within the nation state boundaries. Later on, it changed track. It became something else. So do you discuss this within your organization, that we need to go beyond politically and connect with each other and build up a politics? So that is number one. Number two is that if you think about that, then do you really think or think of maybe a party-like structure, what at one part of time we used to call a vanguard party. A vanguard party would govern all the mass actions. Their fronts would operate in various sections of the society, and the vanguards would would be leading the revolution. So whether, if you think that this is still possible today, whether it is at all important to think of something like that. Thank you.
Hi, I am Zoom moderating, but this is coming from me, not one of our Zoom participants. I absolutely am in awe of the things that you were doing. And I thank you all for coming. This was fabulous. I feel that it is very, very personal. And I think that we, in our efforts to discover a politics of liberation for all, I think we need to acknowledge the hierarchies that are embedded within those politics because they are embedded in capitalism. And I keep thinking about what Nora's talk and Anthony's talk and how we learn in my talk and how we learn these things through social reproduction, right? And how it's hard to escape that within which we are living. And which one of the things that I love about world ecology is that we say from the very get-go, we need a new language to talk about these things. And I think, you know, the capital N nature, capital S society are steps in that direction, but we also need to figure out ways to talk about these movements that suppress the hierarchy that is embedded within them. And I don't have answers, but I do think that they need to be discussed. And it's not so much that the personal is political, but that the political is personal. And I don't exactly know how to twist that on its head. But in personal experiences, I mean, I'm about as privileged as they get. And yet, and I often walk in a world where it's easy to forget just how awful it is, right? In part because I surround myself by people who are kind and generous. And yet, about a month ago, I was just doing regular household reproduction and getting a pair of new shoes for my son. And I was verbally accosted in the parking lot by a man who did not like the way I parked, classic American trope. And he was calling me a cunt and yelling at me and got out of his car and he was like, I'm gonna beat you up. And, you know, I mean, and it was very disturbing, obviously. And this is part of these politics, right? It's not just activism about big E environment, right? This is also about how do we transform the gender relations that are part of that as well. And while the experience itself was disturbing, I was also felt bad for him, right? Because he's so disempowered that this was his response to the world. And my last thought is about the 1980s in Oregon and the spotted owl movement, which pitted deforestation or logging, it wasn't even deforestation by typical standards, against the newly endangered species of the spotted owl. And people got mad at the loggers. And again, it's this issue of work, right? Do we protect the forest or do we protect the workers who are getting paid to do this? And in that movement of the time, no one talked about the capitalists who were paying the workers to cut the timber, or the state who gave them access to national forests, right? So I think these are all embedded, and I think that's part of what world ecology can do, is expose these threads within the web of life and help us to understand how to pull them out and talk about them and change the whole thing. Nora, you coming up next? Thank you.
I'm shorter. Yeah. Oh, it's yeah. Okay. Well, thank you very much for all your talks and interventions, of course. And I want to say something without false humbleness. You know, one of you asked, theory is good, or social sciences or the academy would be good in order to explain how conflicts are solved and how conflicts emerge. And I think you know that much better. You know, I don't, in sociology, in part of sociology, we have this idea that people have stories and scientists have the explanations. And I don't believe in that. And I'm really saying, I don't want to be humble, you know, and say active and romanticize activists, but you have knowledges and theories and understandings that we don't have. So the question is really, like Omar said, is really to exchange our knowledges and not to think that we as academics can explain things better than people who are on the ground and actually making that kind of connections about which we think as academics, it would be fantastic if there would be that connections, you know, and you're making it and you know how to do it and you know how to theorize it. So I think we need to have an exchange on equal levels about our different kinds of knowledges that we know as a result of our different kind of practices and experiences, but it's not one knowledge is theory and the other is practice.
Okay, as Zoom moderator, I am relaying a contribution from our comrade Jennifer Casolo. She writes, so many indigenous peoples are also dependent on migrant labor in sites where rural workers and other workers are also present. What links are there between indigenous resistance, rural workers, migrants, and environmental defenders?
Hi, well, thanks a lot for all your presentations. I would like to address Omar. I'm going to speak to him in Spanish. Omar, me gustó mucho tu presentación, ya habíamos hablado, pero quisiera preguntarte si conoces, si tuviste contacto con el libro de Copenhague que habla sobre los conflictos de la comunidad Yanomami amazónica sobre todo con el gobierno, y que es una conflictividad muy presente hoy en día, sobre todo con el gobierno de derechas liberal de Bolsonaro. Entonces, ¿cómo pensás también ahí una conflictividad política entre las comunidades indígenas o descendientes de indígenas respecto de estados que son abiertamente anti-indígenas, digamos, exterminadores en lo posible de indígenas? What I was asking Omar was about if he has been in touch with a book by Yanomami shaman of the Amazonic community. His name is David Copenhague, and the book is called The Falling of Sky, or Falling Skies. And it is, well, a story about this community which lives in the Amazon, and it is being harassed by the Brazilian government, which is the current Brazilian government is anti-indigenous people. Well, they are pushing very hard on the agrarian frontier, so they are trying to eliminate these communities for use the land to have cows and, I don't know, the agribusiness in different ways. So these Yanomamis had the need to go public with their not only with their problems, but also with the way they think about the world. So they call Western people, they call Western people us people of merchandise, los pueblos de la mercancía. And well, they, in some way, they teach the Western people how they think about the world. It's a very different ontology. So I think that when we are in touch with those kinds of ontologies, we can also understand Western ways of life, imperial ways of life, like another presenter was telling today, better than maybe how differently that the way we can describe ourselves when we see it from a different point of view. So well, something like that. Thank you.
Now I am speaking for Roberto Garcia in Cuba. A fundamental issue is the need to revitalize the role of local indigenous knowledge within Western rationality, which has minimized, ignored, or undervalued it in relation to the knowledge of the so-called hard sciences.
Jason, you wanted a very quickly, I'm struck. It's great by Roberto Garcia in Cuba, who of course comes from a country that defended itself against regime change politics. Unfortunately, our comrade from Guatemala, your country was, your people were destroyed by American regime change politics from 1954 to today. And I think that one of the great tragedies of environmentalism in the rich countries since 1970 has been a complete and abject failure on the question of European imperialism, above all American imperialism, and its ruthless regime change politics. Indeed, the word ecocide comes from the world anti-war movement against the Vietnam War and the destruction of its peoples and its environments. And the birth of environmentalism represented a volte-face away from the critique of ecocide and the centrality of imperialism. When the US began to recover from the Vietnam War syndrome in El Salvador, in Guatemala, in Honduras, in Panama, I'll run out of breath before I can finish this, the environmentalist movements in the rich countries refused to come out into the streets against regime change politics. Today, environmentalists are nowhere to be found, eco-socialists perhaps differently, environmental justice advocates perhaps differently, but there is a problem, a rotten problem at the core of the environmental politics, the mainstream environmental politics of the rich countries around regime change politics. We see this again and again in the world, in Syria, in the NATO, US-NATO proxy war, in the Ukraine, in countless places around the world, in Somalia, where the US has just deployed soldiers, again in Sahara, which the US supports the Moroccan occupation of. These are moments of genocidal and ecocidal thrust that environmentalism in the rich countries refuses to mobilize against. And if I sound a little bit angry or impassioned, it's because I am. And so I think what I want to ask is, how do we reckon, not just with international solidarity, hugely important, absolutely important, how do we also build a global anti-war, anti-imperialist movement to stop these rotten regime change politics by the imperialists of everywhere? Putin everywhere. This is Lenin's insight. The wars of redivision impel the international working class to pursue revolutionary defeatism. Let's remember, World War I comes to an end by German sailors and soldiers mutinying, and then the revolution in Russia. So that's my, sorry if I seem impassioned or angry, I'm not angry at you, I'm angry at an imperialist world that treats people like garbage and the rest of life like garbage, and war making is so much at the core of this.
Great. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for very interesting and challenging questions and comments and insights. So we're going to do a final round. Should we use the same order or the other order? The other way around. So Omar, would you like to start? Is that okay?
No conozco el libro,
I don't know the book you were talking about,
pero conozco los conflictos entre indígenas.
but I know the conflict between indigenous group there.
Y uno de los libros importantes de los mayas,
One of the important books of the Maya,
el Popol Vuh,
el Popol Vuh.
Dice que también hay hermanos corazón de palo, o sea, corazón de madera, que no sienten.
There are also brothers, they have a heart of wood that they don't feel.
Y lo dice con un sentido de comprender cómo funcionan también nuestros pueblos.
And it says that because it's also a way of understanding how our people work and function.
Y esos hermanos corazón de palo o de madera
And those brothers with a heart of wood
pueden ser captados por las élites económicas.
are easy targeted by the elites.
Y es un fenómeno que vemos en toda América Latina.
And that is a phenomenon that we see in all Latin America.
Lo importante es conocerlo
The important thing is to know that
para poder saber cómo tratar con los hermanos.
in order to understand how we can treat with these brothers.
Porque aunque son hermanos corazón de madera,
Although they are brothers with the heart of wood, I don't know if it's right the translation, but okay, sorry.
no significa que son diferentes a nosotros o son nuestros enemigos.
It doesn't mean that they are our enemies.
No los consideramos nuestros enemigos.
We do not consider them our enemies.
Y esa es la diferencia entre las personas que piensan con el capital
That is the difference between people that think about or with capital
y las personas que necesitamos un futuro en este mundo.
and the people that need, that need what? Necesitamos qué?
Vivir en este mundo.
That need to live in this world.
Porque le damos un trato diferente.
Because we give a special treatment, different.
Entonces, vamos a vivir con eso siempre.
We are going to live with them or in this way always.
Estoy hablando de un libro de 500 años atrás
I'm talking about a book that is as old as 500 years.
que nos decía que sí existen hermanos que van a estar a la par de las empresas del capital.
That already talked about that they were the brothers that will be on side of capital.
Pero miremos Chile,
Let's look at Chile,
la meca del capitalismo en América Latina.
the mecca of capitalism in Latin America.
Mapuches, jóvenes,
Young Mapuche, indigenous people,
mujeres,
women,
han puesto en jaque al capital.
has put capital in jaque. Check, just check. Yes.
Entonces, yo prefiero ver la esperanza
I prefer to see for hope.
y estas luchas en Guatemala, en Alemania, en el mundo,
And these struggles in Guatemala, here in Germany, or in the world,
en un planeta casi avasallado por el capital,
in a planet that has been avasallado, I don't know, but this when you have passed through it and destroyed in a way, I don't know.
podríamos sentir que ya no hay nada que hacer,
We could just feel that there is nothing to do, nothing left to do,
pero estas luchas nos dan esperanza.
but this kind of struggle give us hope.
Y nosotros estamos viendo Chile
We are seeing Chile today.
como los neoliberales están viendo qué pasa en Chile.
Neoliberals are looking also what is happening in Chile.
La diferencia es qué vamos a hacer nosotros.
The difference is what are we going to do?
¿Cómo aprendemos de esa alianza de pueblos indígenas, mujeres y jóvenes?
How do we learn from these people, from their way of thinking?
Que hoy el capital está en riesgo.
Today, capital is at risk.
Apenas empieza la lucha en Chile,
The fight has just started in Chile.
pero también apenas empezamos en todo el mundo.
We are just starting in the rest.
Pero ahí está la esperanza de poder articularnos.
There is the hope to articulate this struggle.
la izquierda de reinventarse,
the left of reinventing itself,
porque ya se acomodó.
because it has already accommodated.
Dialogan con las élites de derecha,
The dialogue with the right wing,
tienen un puesto en los congresos
place in the parliament,
y con eso se sienten bien.
and with it they feel okay.
También tenemos nosotros que cuestionarlos para que piensen más allá.
Also have to put questions so they can see further away.
Pero ese es un trabajo de nosotros.
It is their work.
He participado en otros eventos donde hay académicos
I have participated in other events with academicians,
y me da mucho miedo lo que dicen,
and I get very scared of hearing what they say,
porque cuando hay un proyecto minero,
because when there is a mining project,
van a estudiar por qué se oponen los indígenas.
they go and look why indigenous people oppose to the mining project.
No van a estudiar por qué el capital nos sigue destruyendo.
They don't study why capitalists continue to destroy nature.
Pero acá estamos hablando de eso,
We are talking about it here,
de cómo entender el capital
how to understand capital
y cómo articular las luchas sociales.
and how to articulate the social struggles.
Entonces, este es un espacio de esperanza
So this is a space of hope
que hay que fortalecerlo
that we need to strengthen
y darle más fuerza.
and give it even more force.
Gracias.
Thank you so much.
Okay, one of the questions was if there is kind of a, if I understood it right, if there's kind of a future vision, kind of a communist dream, anything like this. And I can only tell you about my own comrades and Fridays for Future activists and myself. And I think this kind of vision always comes up in concrete struggles, like those people of Florence I told you about. They say that they have a narrative of those workers and those climate activists who together talk about we need another future, like we need another plan for another mobility system. And we share this vision of it's about our common future and also the future of the whole world. And if we don't stop to produce e-mobility, how do you say it, e-motoren, like electric motors, then the whole world like will have a lot of new problems. So in those moments exist those visions, I think, but I'm pretty sure that we cannot create it from the top, like talk about the new world a lot and then the new world comes. I think it's not working this way around, but it develops in the concrete struggles. So I think what we can do is connect those people who try to fight together and to find solutions which are ecologic and socially, and try to connect those people who around the world. And yeah, I think this question of what a role do social scientists can have is very interesting, because like from my experience, I learned so much from sociologists who, for example, wrote about the green bands, as Oliver said yesterday, or about the Lucas plan, or who tried to analyze this dynamics in the Lausitz of jobs and environment, that I do think that there are very important questions on which every activist at one point comes. And yeah, as you said, actually, I think it's not like it fits together that if we reflect those like those experience which activists do and then talk about it, then we can get step by step forward, and not only the activists have the knowledge, but I think it's a very good, it can be a very good conversation. And as Hans Rackwitz said, he said, isn't the question where the power lies. Like, how do we, if we want to change everything in 8 years, or I don't know, we don't have that much time, then I do think that it would be interesting if we do research on historically seen in which moments did big change come. Like, what should we, because we activists, we do ask ourselves on which strategy should we focus on, and I think it would be very interesting to talk a lot about power resources of all the different parts of the society, as we discussed just here, because we do need to decide what we do for the next year or the next 10 years, because like time is running out. And the last thing I want to say is that I share your feeling about this necessary anti-imperialist struggle. And we try to do a congress in the end of this year, an eco-socialist congress in Leipzig, and there we have 3 topics: energy, mobility, and imperialism. I think this is one moment where we need all of you, for example, to discuss, okay, how's the analysis? And now how can we, like, who do we need to invite that we can also talk about strategy? And I think we will invite all the harbor workers who, for example, do not want to bring the, like, who don't want to, what do you say? Die Waffen nicht. Yeah, who don't want to transport weapons, for example, people who can tell those stories. I think we need all those people who try to tell us how to stop the, as he yesterday said, how to stop the monster right there where it's produced, or yeah, Rosa Luxemburg quote. I think we need to get active everywhere there where we live, with our colleagues, neighbors, and so on, and try to fix this big problem.
Thank you so much.
Right. Sadly, Hans has left, who made these very pointed comments about what I'd said. So I didn't say the jobs we destroyed because I believe that we destroyed jobs because of pulling forward the coal exit. That was more like the possible imaginary of the union member who would want to kill me, but actually thought completely differently, luckily. And so the question he also posed was, what did Ende Gelände serve for? And I think it was very useful to highlight the struggle against coal and inspire a lot of people to get into that subject, because coal was not on the political map before Ende Gelände, I'd say. And then he asked, but is it up to the task of the change that we need? And I would say no. It's far too single issue. It's far too difficult to participate. As you asked, is there like a vision of, for example, communism or so? I'd say nowhere near. Like we have this slogan, system change, not climate change, and it's repeated over and over again, but people never spell out what this system change could look like. Actually, people will speak German and then use the phrase system change, the term system change in English, as if there wasn't a German word for it, because it's so abstract. And then we say stuff like good life for all, or Andre said world socialism, and I'm doubtful whether that's gonna work for people. Like I don't find it that people believe us when we say that, and I think we need a bit more messy stories, a bit dirty utopias, because it's not going to be good as far as I can see. Like stuff like what Rebecca Solnit investigated about how people react to disasters, and that actually they often have very nice reactions, apart from the authorities. Maybe we need to talk more about how to repair this shit, and thereby also create a connection with the land that you talked a lot about, and that I see lacking here. And yeah, that's why we, for this this abstract system change, are looking towards, or are infused by the feminist movement, by people of color, by indigenous people, first and foremost. We, like in the anti-coal struggle, are connected in Germany with Mapuche people, with the Wayu from Colombia, with the Kurdish movement, Black Lives Matter. That there in those struggles, I think there's a lot of perspectives for how these messier utopias could look. Concrete examples of that. Yeah, and that leads me to this question of what can world ecology do? I think one thing would be to work on these messier utopias. And the other one is the question of organization. I think, yeah, as these spectacles and this interventionist politics aren't up to the task. And then I went on to this Alle Dörfer bleiben, which is already organizing and more long-term, but still not with the working class. My next question would be like, how do we organize? Is a party, for example, necessary? I think in Germany, actually, at the moment, there's a massive vacuum with the decline of the left party. And how do we build that up? Does it have to be vanguard? I'm not very sure about that term. My interest is in people becoming active themselves and sharing skills. And vanguard sounds to me like they're always being like this elite within the social movements. And I'm not sure of the outcomes of that. And are there other ways of organizing? What I heard here, what Hans also said was that workers' struggles can be a key. But, and that would be maybe another job for world ecology. I think that not every labor struggle is the same. Like with the trade union in the coal mining sector, we could not connect. The interests were so different, and that specific trade union was so conservative and had that own interest of keeping its own union alive. While in Italy, there was the loss of the factory. It was a convertible industry. You can't convert a massive lignite mine very well. It was an accessible union. So, not every it's not the workers. It's there's very different labor struggles, and it would be very useful to see, where are points of common interest. That I think that would be really useful research. And yeah, that's more or less it. Maybe like throw in like those words of inflation and inequality as well as subjects that we should be working on for the future. I have this feeling there's this massive thing coming towards us where people are losing their capacity to their buying power, and I don't see anybody organizing towards that. And I don't know how much research there is on that. But it's like going to hit us very soon as a big political subject.
Thanks so much, Christopher. So to Andre to round up or to finish off, and then yeah.
So just quickly, this thing about activists and activism, I have to say, I never thought of myself as an activist over my entire life. I was an organizer. I always thought of myself as a revolutionary. And I think there is something more than semantics that's involved there. I think that activism involves a certain kind of, let's say, expertise in social change that we can claim, a little bit of something that smacks of a profession, orientation. Revolutionary is something to me more all-encompassing. And that's why I think that we need to think, why did we lost the sense, the need, the urgency to define ourselves in our work as revolutionaries? Did we lose also our hopes? Did we allow those hopes to be taken away from us? Hopes that are revolutionary. My family, they were revolutionaries. They have built socialism in Yugoslavia, socialist self-management. all members of my family, some of them gave their lives to this project, lost their lives to this project. Others continue to do so and to build socialism, and all of them were still alive, still believe in socialist Yugoslavia as a perspective, even though the country does not exist anymore. When I visited Rojava and the Kyrgyz struggles, I have seen a revolution, a social revolution that was limited in time and space, but that is changing absolutely everything in that particular time and space. Social revolution from below. And I refuse to stop believing that revolution in a sense of complete transformation of the society is possible. It is absolutely possible, and it is absolutely necessary. We have to, I think, stop thinking ourselves as activists, as separate from academics. We have to stop to refuse, as we should in our disciplinary universities, we have to refuse the compartmentalization that exists within. But same in the outside of the universities, revolutionaries, activists, and scholars to share the same faith that a completely different civilization is actually possible. We don't want to change few things. We don't want to make to play with few elements and few parts. We want to live in a completely different democratic civilization. And we have to find a way to do that. And I think it begins with the way how we think about the sense of possibilities. My late mentor, Immanuel Wallerstein, used to speak and write about something that he called utopistics. And he believed in utopistics. He believed that the role of social scientists, together with other revolutionaries, is to actually create and study possible alternative systems, alternative historical possibilities. Real utopias is another term that people. What kind of society do we want to live in? I think it's really important to start thinking about ourselves as revolutionaries once again, just like people before us did, and to rehabilitate that sense of purpose, possibility, utopian possibility, complete transformation, and struggle for an entirely different civilization. Without this, I don't think that we can meet the challenge that capitalism in its, what I believe is its ultimate demise, presents in front of us. Capitalism, and I hope that, well, actually, I don't hope that I'm wrong. I think that this situation opens up certain possibilities. Capitalism can go in a really terrible way. The demise of capitalism can, I think that Jason the other day called it tributary, right? Possibilities of political power, reorganizing productive relations, creating a new civilizations by world government that would be absolutely terrifying to even contemplate. Or we could think about a society that is more egalitarian, that is more free, that is more just. It's up to us to see which one it is going to be, if capitalism is really going to end as a historical system. And key to this is to start again to believe that revolution is possible, and that revolutionary work should unite scholars, artists, activists, destroy those categories, those separations. Again, we are in the world, trapped in the world of binaries and dualism, and create something in which I believe world ecology can serve a very important purpose, a space for contemplation, action, and what Marx used to call praxis, but praxis that needs to be revolutionary. So thank you very much, and I think it was a great time.
Thanks so much, everyone. I also thought it was a great panel, and thanks for all of you for coming and for all your great contributions. So before we close for the day, we have 3 announcements. Sylvain is going to come up. Tonight, the first one is tonight is a free night, so you can basically do what you want. You can organize yourselves and go to a beer garden. Yeah. Second one is that tomorrow we are inviting you all to join us at our Department of Southeast Asian Studies around the corner for a closing event, or in other words, a party. And there's enough to eat, there's enough to drink, there's enough, there'll be music, I hope. And so, yeah, you can come, you can bring a friend, you don't have to bring a bottle.
Well, yeah, I feel a bit ridiculous of speaking right now because these struggles are way more important. But around the corner, when you go out left from the out the university, there's a library which went bankrupt, and now they are throwing everything away, and like yeah, not giving the books to anyone. So if you have some time and don't know what to do, you can just find books in a big, like enormous. Um, Rubbish, yeah, container, and yeah, that's it. Organize yourselves.
Go, Joseph.
Sorry, oops, sorry. One last announcement for the party tomorrow. The ones of you who are coming, who of you is caring for vegetarian sausages rather than meat sausages? One person, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Okay, so it's 7. All right, thanks.
Yep, I'm good.